What up? I'm Fetty Wap. With me, as always, is Designer. Where did they go? It's Lit Book Reviews. Welcome back. This is the podcast where we discuss all things books, otherwise known as It Is Literature. And today, we are going to give you our recommendations for history books. If you're not really into history, I mean, even if you are, certainly read them. But if you're wanting to get into reading some history and you don't know where to go, or you don't know what you should get into, we've got a handful of recommendations. We got five, our top recommendations, and then some honorable mentions. We tried to keep these around like 400 pages. That way, if you're new to it and don't want to read a 900-page biography, there's some different books out there for you. So
yeah,
that's what we're going to do today.
you'd say these two are also these are the most readable. So you'd say like for beginners, if you've never read history before, this isn't going to be like something super dense. You're going to get a lot out of it, but these kind of read as close to fiction as some of the books we've ever read, I guess. Like they're the most engaging, but you're going to learn.
Yeah,
not good segues.
Don't expect it to be written
boys.
like fiction, but in the sense that they are as engaging and readable, like you said. Yeah, for sure. Some of them do read like a novel, though. Really, you're actually correct in a lot of these scenarios, especially the first one. So let's start it off, and we will be mentioning other books by some of these authors in case you really enjoy them, but you can also find them yourselves. All these authors are great. So starting us off in these first five, I kind of tried to go in chronological order a bit. We've got our love, Tom Holland, one of our favorite historians, not Spider-Man. The first book in a trilogy called The History of Rome, Rubicon, The Last Years of the Roman Republic. This book is right under 400 pages if you take out the notes. Came out in 2003. It's got 24,000 ratings with a 4.23 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. This is one of my favorite books of all time. Certainly one of my favorite history books. And again, Tom Holland is one of my favorite authors. I've read most of his work. All of his stuff is great. But this first book in this trilogy, like we were just saying, it reads like a novel. It feels like you're watching a $1 billion HBO show in your head, how epic he makes some of these moments. And if you don't know Rubicon, that's a famous term for when you cross some line, because Julius Caesar literally crossed the Rubicon before he started the Roman Civil War. So that is what this book is about. And it's really good. I would recommend this to anyone, especially if you are wanting to read some history on antiquity. So this is the Roman Republic, or as the book states, the last years of the Roman Republic. So that's our first recommendation if you want to get into some history. And also, just while we're talking Tom Holland, you can speak to this more, but they've also got a great podcast. It's much better than ours. So if you really want some history knowledge, you should check out The Rest is History.
Yeah, they're not doing a lot of book recommendations. Yeah, they just do a really good job of breaking stuff down. And I mean, they're especially Tom, especially when it comes to anything that deals with the Roman Empire and like their spread through Europe. I mean, obviously that's his main focus, but if you're trying to, I'm curious to know, like if someone who doesn't necessarily know a lot about history or care, like I wonder if it would feel like a lot listening to them, because we at least have a decent foundation just because we've read a decent amount, and that's just kind of like our thing is history. But they're funny, man. The way they riff back and forth, great. It's like and they're both British, so it just sounds cool. But yeah, it's good. They break down stuff really, really well.
So so if you specifically want a history podcast, The Rest is History with Tom Holland and Dominic, what's his last name?
Sandabrook.
Sandabrook.
Yeah, he's lesser known.
Yeah. So Tom Holland, we recommend his work, all of it, but Rubicon is a great book if you want to get into some Roman history. We actually have a video.
Soon too.
Yeah, you do. It's so good. But we do have a video on the channel covering this whole series and some other work just on the history of Rome. So check that out if you want. Next up, so moving forward a little bit in history to medieval times, if you will. We've got one that we read recently that came out recently, Henry V, The Astonishing Triumph of England's Greatest Warrior King by Dan Jones. This is about 400 pages. It's really it's a quick read, fast-paced, super engaging. Came out in 2024. Yeah. It's got like 4,000 ratings with a 4.43. So, I mean, I love this book. What would you say about Henry V for new readers?
Oh, yeah, it was so good. I mean, it's it's fun because it's more of a biography style, and then we have some other authors later on, but this is one of the first times when I read. It does read just like a novel, like it's history, and I think a lot of that has to do with it being a biography, mainly following just Henry V. But it's just so interesting, and he does a good job of referencing sources. But then also, like, if there isn't a source, he's going to say, "Well, this is kind of commonly believed," but he's not going to just say something if it's not true. But the way he writes it,
he's not going to take liberties.
Yeah, but it doesn't take you out, though, when he's also mentioning, hey, I'm not taking liberties. I feel like sometimes maybe that could take you out of the story a little bit, but he just is really good at writing. His most popular book is the Plantagenets, the warrior kings and queens who made England. So this is kind of like a prequel. I own this book, but I haven't read it yet. So I'm curious to see if it reads similar, because it seems to follow more just people instead of like maybe a broad event. I did read the Templars by him, and it was really good. Not in the same scale as, it's a different read than Henry V. It's still really good and interesting, but instead of following one guy, I mean, you're following a group of people over 200-300 years. So it does jump around a lot. So I feel like that could be tough maybe for someone if they haven't read history before. But in general, Dan Jones, though, is just so much easier to read. You don't really, it doesn't take nearly as much effort, in my opinion, compared to some other writers that I think are still really good writers. But I think that's mainly Dan Jones' goal. He wants to make history readable. I feel like you can tell like he's putting effort
and accessible for everyone.
Mesh, mesh like it's real academic work. It's not like that. It's not, but mesh that with like, okay, not everyone can be a historian, so like let's kind of meet in the middle, maybe.
Yeah, let's make it approachable to learn cool things. So yeah, we highly recommend Henry V. If you don't know who that is, and you've seen The King with Timothée Chalamet on Netflix, that's who this book is about, and you'll find it very interesting that some things that are depicted in the movie, which is based on Shakespeare's play, are not historically accurate, and that's just how things are.
And
with
that book is
movies.
Crazy too. Like what happens?
It's still crazy. Yeah,
insane. So that's
why
it also reads
just
like a
as
novel.
good. Yeah, it could have been just as good, if not
up.
better, of a movie. Yeah, you don't have to make anything up for this to be really entertaining. So that's Henry V by Dan Jones. That's number 2. Number 3 is by an absolute legend of an author who is specifically known for writing books to be read like fiction novels. And that's Erik Larson. And this is The Devil in the White City, Murder, Magic, and Madness at the Fair That Changed America. This book is probably a little over 400 after the notes and such. Came out in 2003. It's got a 4.0 flat out of 5 stars with 728,000 ratings.
I didn't realize that many. That's crazy.
It's crazy. I mean, those are crazy numbers. I mean, that's bigger than, Stormlight and a lot of other like fantasy series. I mean, I feel like this is one of the most popular books on Goodreads.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never read
it either. I can't believe I've read 3 of his, and I haven't read this one for some reason.
I know. So yeah, he has a lot of great works, which we'll touch on in a moment. But The Devil in the White City is essentially about a fair that was going on in Chicago in the 1890s, and how that fair was developed, which is crazy in itself. But he's telling 2 stories in this book, and one of them is about the guy who created the fair essentially and is putting it all together, and all of the stresses and ups and downs that come with that. And it is truly fascinating. But on the other side, for you serial killer podcast listeners, he is talking about a serial killer who operates during this fair, which goes on for months and months, if not years. I can't quite remember. It's been years since I read it. But it's fascinating. It's very popular for a reason. It's one of those really good books that the rights, I think, have gone back and forth between different actors or producers or whomever, and it just has not gotten made yet into a feature film or show. But if and when it does, it'll be super entertaining. So yeah, this book reads like a mystery novel almost in a lot of ways. Truly fascinating. And Erik Larson is great. We've read a lot of his work. The one that always comes to mind for me when I'm thinking of other things he's written is The Splendid and the Vile. I think that might be my next favorite book by him. But one of your favorite books is Dead Wake. Right?
Yeah, Dead Wake was really, it might have been the first Erik Larson book I ever read, and that's on the crossing of the Lusitania. Not to spoil the book, because I mean the Lusitania was sank,
It was
over 100 years ago.
Rest in peace.
But I mean, kind of the point that he makes in that book is that the British knew that the Germans were going to sink that ship, and they let it happen anyway. And that just blew my mind. Like as like just someone who didn't have all the historical context, because again, the U.S. was not in World War I yet, and so the British, they needed the U.S. to get in it, so they kind of made some sacrifices, crunched the numbers, it seems. But that's a crazy story, going back and forth with the people on the ship, the people who are like in the British like intelligence office who are getting these intercepted messages, and then also the people in the U-boat that sinks it. It's kind of going back and forth between all three of those. But yeah, I mean, his writing, I'm surprised nothing's been made into a movie, just because it does read like it reads like no other history that I've read. Even Dan Jones, which is great, is not like Eric Larson. Definitely is. I feel like that guy when it comes to.
He's the goat of turning history into what feels like a fiction movie that you're reading, but still being true to the truth of history, and giving you the details and everything, but just writing it so well to where you really can't put it down. It's super engaging. So this one's kind of like a 3A and 3B, The Devil in the White City, as well as Dead Wake, both by Eric Larson. You can either go into a crazy Chicago fair with a serial killer, or you can jump ahead in history a little bit and get a World War I story. But then he has a couple books on World War II. He's got a great book that we read at the end of last year called The Demon of Unrest.
I actually never read that.
The beginning of the Civil War. Oh, you didn't read that? I thought you did.
I haven't. Yeah, I need to though.
That's actually my second favorite by him. It might top Splendid in the Vial for me.
That's the start of the Civil War, right? Fort Sumter.
Yeah, it's Fort Sumter. And man, that book is so good. So yeah, just read something by Eric Larson. That's just an overall recommendation from It's a Book Reviews. So that's number 3. Moving on to number 4, we have got Candace Millard, another GOAT historian. I love all of her work that I've read. And one of my favorite overall books, and a perfect book for someone wanting to get into history, is Destiny of the Republic, A Tale of Madness, Medicine, and the Murder of a President. This book came out in 2011. It's like 300 pages, 80,000 reviews, 4.22 overall. One of my favorite books. It is about James Garfield, and if you don't know, his assassination. He is one of the 4 presidents we have had to be assassinated. He was the second. It's actually kind of crazy. The first 3 that got killed were like in kind of succession, like they weren't very far apart. Anyway, it's the crazy story of not only his rise, but then everything that happened involving his assassination, and how the doctors basically killed him without knowing it. Because this is in this little window of history where in Europe they are aware of antibiotics and things like that, but in America they're still like, no, dude, germs are not real. That's some nonsense. So it's such a tragedy to read about James Garfield dying, because nowadays, like doctors or historians or whomever say that if they had just left the bullet in him and left it alone, he would have been better off, and he probably would have lived. So it's just crazy. James Garfield is a fascinating character. Could have been, in my opinion, one of our great presidents, but he was only president for 4 months and then got killed. So yeah, Destiny of the Republic by Candace Millard. I've recommended this book to multiple people. Every single one of them have ripped through it and loved it, and most of those are people who don't read as much as we do. So I definitely think this one belongs on our list.
Yeah.
Have you haven't read the she has other great works. River of Doubt is one. And then there's one about Churchill and the Boer War.
She's great. I want to read about the Boer War.
It's about Churchill and the Boer War. It's pretty crazy.
It's been coming up a lot with the old WW1
I've been reading stuff. A lot of World War I stuff lately. Okay, so moving on. You may very well have heard of this book. A Leonardo DiCaprio movie has been made inspired by this book. It is Killers of the Flower Moon, The Osage Murders, and the Birth of the FBI by David Gran. This book is, again, right around 300 pages. It's got 413,000 ratings. Came out in 2017, so those are crazy numbers. 4.14 out of 5 on Goodreads. This is a great book. I haven't seen the movie, actually. I didn't hear the best things about the movie, and I just don't watch a lot of movies and TV over the last few years as I used to. If I'm watching something, it's usually Braves baseball or one of the few shows or movies that I do tune in for, like Dune 2, Lisan Al Gaib. But Killers of the Flower Moon is crazy. It's super sad, and it's one of those books you read, and it just further disillusions you with American history and its corruption and all the atrocities that humanity has committed. But that's kind of history in general, really. But yeah, this is basically about the FBI getting involved with, to not spoil it, but to give you a brief synopsis if you haven't heard of it or seen the movie or know anything about it. It's essentially America encroaching onto native land because they find oil, and all of the corrupt, terrible things they do to try to secure that land from these Indians and their descendants, or Native Americans, I should say. My fault. But yeah, Killers of the Flower Moon is a great book. Have you read this?
I have not. It's crazy to think
we read The Wager, though.
We did read The Wager, and it was pretty good. Grant. It was interesting. It has a lot of reviews too. I remember this being like really popular when it first came out, and it was an easy read. It was like right at 300 pages, I think. The Wager, that is. And I mean, it was definitely a crazy story. I mean, it makes you never. I mean, I would never want to get on a ship in the 1700s ever.
No,
I mean, ever. But
no shot, dude. I'd rather be crucified by the Romans, I think, than be stuck on a ship for 6 months.
This sounds terrible, but I mean, in that sense, it was a very quick read. I think I gave it 4 stars when I read it. But
yeah, it was a good one. I do think Killers of the Flower Moon is better than that book, but it has been a long time since I read Killers, and The Wager we read not too long ago. We actually have a video on that book with Caroline, if you guys want to check it out. But yeah, great book, Killers of the Flower Moon. Easy read, really engaging, kind of like we've been saying with these other books. So yeah.
Would you put Eric Larson over David Grann, though?
Yeah, I'd put Eric Larson over a lot of historians, for me personally, and especially in regard to this conversation. As far as people getting into history if they haven't read a lot of it. So we're locked back in. So those are the top 5 recommendations from It's Lit Book Reviews for if you haven't read a lot of history and you want to get into it. These are all fairly short books, super engaging. They don't read like a lot of history. They're not boring at all. Very engaging. A couple of honorable mentions. If you want to get into a little battle zone, if you will, in the Civil War and read about how horrifying that was to be a part of, Shiloh 1862 by Winston Groom is about the Battle of Shiloh between the old Union and Confederates, and it is horrifying and crazy and wild. And if you want some Civil War history, it's a good book. Next up, famous author, famous show based on this book, Band of Brothers by Stephen E. Ambrose. E Company, 506 Regiment, 101st Airborne from Normandy to Hitler's Eagle Nest. I mean, crazy subtitle on that book.
That is a great
The show, this is one of the few things, this is one of the few times you'll hear me say this. It might be the one single time you hear me say this. This book is amazing, and I highly recommend you read it. But if you watch the show, Band of Brothers, the miniseries, 10-episode miniseries, you are going to get more out of it than this book.
Yeah, it is really
And that's
good.
crazy to say, but it's because it's much longer. It's like over 10 hours. It does not take you 10 hours to read this book. It's only, this says it's 430 pages. It is not that long. My copy is like 300 pages flat. This must be a souped up version with pictures or something in big letters. But easy read, great book. But if you don't want to read it and you haven't seen the show, you should watch the show. So, Band of Brothers.
Great show.
Next up, King Leopold's Ghost, a story of greed, terror, and heroism in colonial Africa. This story will give you all the historical context you need for the famous piece of literature, The Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, I think. Can't remember. Been since high school since I read that, but both of those books are famous. That one more so, but this is a great book. I'm actually reading a book right now by this author that's also really good called American Midnight. But King Leopold's Ghost is great. It's about the history of the Congo and the absolute atrocities that occurred there. So check that out if you want to be horrified by the capacity of humanity to destroy one another.
Yeah.
And then last up, The Spy and the Traitor, the greatest espionage story of the Cold War by Ben McIntyre. This is a great book. Ben McIntyre is a really good author on espionage and spies, but the real stuff, which is sometimes less exciting, but always more fascinating than what you see in movies. So Ben McIntyre is He's got a lot of great books. You've read a few as well, right?
Yeah, I'm just looking too on Goodreads at all the books he's written, and it's so many. On like so many niche topics. Like that's clearly his thing. It's just finding something and just diving into it, which it's always interesting. I read Colditz, or it's called Prisoners of the Castle, an epic story of survival and escape from Colditz, the Nazis' fortress prison. And it was good. And it was short too. So it was one of those like right at 300 pages. So, I mean,
and I read Double Cross by him, which is really good. Yeah. With pictures, of course.
Does he have a
show? Ben McIntyre is good.
Is The Spy and the Traitor, is there a show based off that?
I don't know. Not that I know of.
Maybe not. Never mind.
I don't know, but it's a good one. It's a fun read. So those are our recommendations if you have not read a lot of history or any at all and you want to get into it, especially if you're coming from reading a lot of fantasy and sci-fi. We feel that these books are obviously not like that, but very engaging, hard to put down once you get into them. So those are our recommendations.
I think a lot of these can be, once you start reading certain things too, especially for history, I feel like you can see the inspiration for a lot of things. When it comes
if you enjoy it, you'll find yourself, wanting to look into more eras and, read more history. So it's a vicious cycle of you buying a ton of history books. So beware. Anything else?
It is. That's it. Yeah. If you have anything else though, that let's say you've read something that you would think anyone should read, like not just because we have some thick boy recommendations and it was tough to not recommend those, especially for Jesse. He's got some thick boys that are just solids, which for me too, it's the same. So it's just always tough when people are, they see you reading thick history books and they're like kind of thrown off. And it's like, I mean, you don't always just start off there. It's it's a progressional thing. So it's trying to figure out books like, hey, what are these books that we would recommend? So if there's something that you think would get someone into history that anyone could read, definitely drop that in the comments because I'm curious too. Because I always need more books to recommend to people that maybe aren't the biggest into history.
Yeah. And since you brought it up, if you do want to read a thick boy, you should read American Ulysses by Ronald C. White. All right, it's Lit Book Reviews out. 1738.
Hey.